Back with part 3 of this week's reading of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible, Tree of Life Version, TLV, and we are finishing up the book of Ezekiel. This week we are reading Ezekiel 33 to 48, which will be the end of the book of Ezekiel, and we are now going to begin chapter 38, Gog's alliance invades Israel. And when we think of Gog and Magog, um, in chapters 38 and 39, we're thinking also um, of prophecy for the future as well. And Jesus will rule in our midst in the millennial reign, as we know, Yeshua. And in the latter days, we get to look, because Gog and Magog will happen, and this part has not happened yet. Like I said, this is a future prophecy as well. God will destroy the enemies of Israel, and this is definitely will come. There's war, flood, pestilence, and earthquake, hail, fire, and brimstone in these chapters, which we're about to read. So we're going to start with, I'm going to read through chapters 38 and 39. The word of Adonai came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face toward God of the land of Magog, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. Prophesy against him, and say, Thus says Adonai Elohim, Behold, I am against you, God, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. I will turn you about and put hooks into your jaws. I will bring you out with all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them splendidly dressed, a vast assembly with breastplate and shield, all of them wielding swords. With them will be Persia, Push and Put, all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer, and all his troops, the house of Togarmah from the extreme north, and all his troops, many peoples with you. Be prepared, prepare yourself, you and all your company gathered around you. Be a guard for them. After many days you will be summoned in the latter years. You will come against the land that has been brought back from the sword, and regathered from many peoples on the mountains of Israel, which had been a continual waste. But they were brought out from the peoples. When all of them are dwelling securely, you will come up. You will come up like a storm, and you will be like a cloud covering the land. You and all your troops and many peoples with you. Thus says Adonai Elohim, it will come to pass in that day that things will come into your heart, and you will devise an evil plan. You will say, I will go up against the land of unwalled villages. I will fall upon the quiet people who live securely, all of them living without walls, having no bars or gates, in order to seize spoil and carry off plunder, to turn your hand against the waste places now inhabited, and against the people gathered from the nations who have been acquiring livestock and property, who live in the center of the world. Sheba, Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish with all its young lions will say to you, Have you come to seize spoil? Have you assembled your company to plunder, to carry away silver and gold, to take away livestock and property, to make off with immense spoils? Therefore, son of man, prophesy, say to God, Thus says Adonai Elohim, in that day when my people Israel dwells safely, will you not know? You will come from your place out of the extreme north, you and many peoples with you, all of them riding on horses, a great company and mighty army. You will come up against my people Israel like a cloud covering the land. It will happen in the last days. I will bring you against my land so that the nations may know me, when I am sanctified through you, Gog, before their eyes. Thus says Adonai Elohim, are you the one that I spoke about in former times through my servants, the prophets of Israel, who prophesied in those days for many years that I would bring you against them? In that day when Gog comes against the land of Israel, it is a declaration of Adonai. My fury will rise up in my nostrils. In my jealousy and the fire of my wrath I have spoken. Surely in that day there will be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish of the sea, the birds of the heaven, the beasts of the field, all creeping things that creep upon the ground, and all humans upon the face of the earth will shake at my presence. The mountains will be thrown down. The steep places will fall. Every wall will fall to the ground. I will call for a sword against him throughout all my mountains. It is a declaration of Adonai. Every man's sword will be against his brother. I will punish him with pestilence and blood. I will pour out rain on him, on his troops, and on the many peoples with him, a torrential rain with hailstones, fire, and brimstone. So I will magnify and sanctify myself. I will make myself known in the eyes of many nations, and they will know that I am Adonai. And before I read chapter 39, I'm going to actually look at the footnotes that are at the bottom here for chapter 38. We have Revelation 21, verse 3, and Revelation 20, verse 8. So we're going to look at what they say. I'm going to start the judgment after 1,000 years. This is in chapter 20, starting with verse 7. When the 1,000 years has ended, Satan shall be released from his prison, and he shall come out to deceive the nations at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for the battle. Their number is like the sand of the sea, and they came up on the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the Kedeshim and the beloved city. The fire fell from heaven and consumed them. And then we have chapter 21, verse 3 saying, I also heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling of God is among men, and he shall tabernacle among them. They shall be his people, and God himself shall be among them and be their God. He shall wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Nor shall there be mourning or crying or pain any longer, for the former things have passed away. And that's verse 3 and 4. So we go to chapter 39, the destruction of Gog. You, son of man, prophesy against Gog and say, Thus says Adonai Elohim, Behold, I am against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. I will turn you around, drive you along, and lead you up from the extreme north. I will bring you upon the mountains of Israel. Then I will strike your bow from your left hand and make your arrows drop from your right hand. You will fall in the mountains of Israel, you, all your troops, and the people that are with you. I will give you as food to all kinds of birds of prey, and to the beasts of the field. You will fall on an open field, for I have spoken. It is a declaration of Adonai. I will send fire on Magog, and on those who live securely in the islands. Then they will know that I am Adonai, so I will make my holy name known among my people Israel. I will not let my holy name be profaned any more. The nations will know that I am Adonai, the Holy One in Israel. Behold, it is coming, it will be done. It is a declaration of Adonai. This is the day that I have spoken about. The inhabitants of Israel's cities will go out and kindle fires with the weapons, shields and breastplates, bows and arrows, war clubs and spears. They will make fires with them for 7 years. They will not take wood out of the field or cut anything from the forest, for they will make fire from the weapons. They will plunder those who plundered them, and loot those who looted them. It is a declaration of Adonai. On that day I will give Gog a burial place there in Israel, the valley of the travelers east of the sea. It will block those who travel through, since they will bury Gog and all his multitude there. Then they will call it the valley of Haman Gog. The house of Israel will bury them for 7 months in order to cleanse the land. All the people of the land will bury them. It will be memorable for them, a day when I am glorified. It is the declaration of Adonai. Men will be continually set apart to travel through the land and bury the travelers remaining on the face of the land in order to cleanse it. At the end of 7 months they will make their search. When they travel through the land, if any sees a man's bone, he will set up a sign by it until the buriers have buried it in the valley of Haman Gog. Hamanah will also be the name of the city, so they will cleanse the land. You, son of man, thus says Adonai Elohim, say to every kind of bird and to every beast of the field, assemble and come. Gather from all around to my sacrificial feast that I have prepared for you, a great sacrifice in the mountains of Israel. You will eat flesh and drink blood. You will eat the flesh of mighty men and drink the blood of the princes of the earth, as rams, lambs, goats, bulls, all of them fatlings of Bashan. So you will eat fat until you are gorged, and you will drink blood until you are drunk from my sacrificial feast that I have prepared for you. You will be filled at my table with horses and horsemen, with mighty men and all the warriors. It is the declaration of Adonai. Israel will know Adonai. I will put my glory among the nations. All the nations will see my judgment that I will execute in my hand, that I will lay on them. The house of Israel will know that I am Adonai their God from that day forward onward rather. The nations will know that the house of Israel went into exile for their iniquity because they broke faith with me. So I hid my face from them and gave them into the hand of their enemies. All of them fell by the sword. I dealt with them according to their uncleanness and their transgressions. I hid my face from them. Therefore, thus says Adonai Elohim, now I will restore Jacob from exile when I have compassion on the whole house of Israel. I will be zealous for my holy name. They will bear their shame and all their disloyalty by which they broke faith with me, when they were living securely in their land, with no one making them afraid, when I have brought them back from the peoples and have gathered them out of their enemies' lands. I will sanctify in them in the eyes of many nations. Then they will know that I am Adonai their God, since it was I who caused them to go into exile among the nations, and I who will gather them back to their own land. I will never again leave them there. I will never again hide my face from them, for I have poured out my Ruach upon the house of Israel. It is a declaration of Adonai. Okay, so that is a future prophecy, definitely. And we see it also in Revelation mentioned. The Battle of Armageddon is also mentioned. There's a lot of prophecy when we think about it, too, that yet has not come to pass yet. Now, the ruin of Damascus is one, and although it came very close, there was still a section of Damascus that was inhabited, and the way it is written and prophesied, none of Damascus will be inhabitable. So yes, when we think of end times, we look at these prophecies that have yet to happen, and so we need to be careful not to be date setters, because there is, our God is a God of order, and there is not one thing going to be left undone. If He says it, it's going to come, it will come into fruition. We just don't know the day or the hour. We can watch the seasons and know that the seasons are very near. And we can see a lot of the things that we see uh, written here there's a lot of similarities to things that are going on today, like when we talked about the shepherds not leading their flocks correctly, and the flock being lost, and actually being prey to wolves in sheep's clothing. So yes, there's a lot of parallels to what's going on today as well. So we're going to go on to chapter 40, measurements of a new temple. So now we're talking about also futuristic things, and that is we're talking about a third temple, because we know when Ezekiel is writing, the second temple has been destroyed. So he is prophesying the third temple, which has not been built yet. But we do know there's everything, pretty much, I believe, everything that they need, they have for it. So in the 25th year of our exile, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was struck down, on that very day, the hand of Adonai was on me, and he brought me there. In visions, God brought me to the land of Israel and set me down upon a very high mountain. On it toward the south was something like the construction of a city. He brought me there, and behold, there was a man whose appearance was like bronze. He had a linen cord in his hand, and a measuring rod. He was standing in the gateway. The man said to me, Son of man, see with your eyes, hear with your ears, set your heart on all that I show you. For I brought you here in order to show you and report all that you see to the house of Israel. Behold, an outer wall was all around the house. The measuring rod in the man's hand was 6 cubits long, each of which was a normal cubit and a handbreadth. When he measured the thickness of the wall structure, it was 1 rod, and the height was 1 rod. Then he went to the gate that faced east and went up its steps. When he measured the threshold of the gate, it was 1 rod wide. Also, the other threshold was 1 rod wide. Each guard chamber was 1 rod long and 1 rod wide. The space between the chambers was 5 cubits. The threshold of the gate by the porch of the gate facing the house measuring 1 rod. When he measured the porch of the gate toward the house, it was 1 rod. When he measured the porch of the gate, it was 8 cubits. Its pillars were 2 cubits. The porch of the gate faced the house. Now the guard chambers of the east gate were 3 on this side and 3 on the other side. The 3 had the same measurement. The side pillars had the same measure on this side and on that side. When he measured the width of the entrance of the gate, it was 10 cubits, and the length of the gate was 13 cubits. A barrier wall was in front of the guard chambers, 1 cubit on each side. Each chamber was 6 cubits on each side. When he measured the gate from the roof of the one chamber to the roof of the other, the width was 25 cubits, door facing door. Then he did the pillars 60 cubits. A gateway extended all around to the pillar of the courtyard. Now from the front of the gate of the entrance to the front of the inner porch of the gate measured 50 cubits. There were shuttered windows toward the chambers and toward their pillars within the surrounding gate, and likewise the porches had windows all around inside. On each pillar were palm trees. Then he brought me to the outer court. Behold, there were rooms and pavement made for the surrounding court, with 30 rooms along the pavement. The pavement was by the side of the gates, as wide as the gates were long. This was the lower pavement. He measured the width from the front of the lower gate to the exterior front of the inner court. It was 100 cubits to the east and to the north. Next he measured the length and width of the gate of the outer court facing toward the north. Its guard chambers were 3 on this side and 3 on that side. Its pillars and porches had the same measurements. At the first gate, 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its windows, porches, and palm trees were the same measurements as the gate facing toward the east. Its stairway had 7 steps, and its porch was in front of them. A gate to the inner court was opposite the other gate. Northward and eastward he measured 100 cubits from gate to gate. Then he led me toward the south, and behold, there was a gate toward the south. He measured its pillars and its porches. They had the same measurements. The gates and its porches had windows all around, like the other windows, 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its stairway had 7 steps, and its porches were in front of them. It had palm trees on its pillars, one on this side and another on that side. There was a gate to the inner court toward the south. He measured from gate to gate towards the south, 100 cubits. Then he brought me to the inner court through the south gate. When he measured the south gate, it had the same measurements. Its chambers, pillars, and porch had the same measurements. There were windows in it, and in the surrounding porch. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. There were porches all around, 25 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. Its porch was toward the outer court. Palm trees were on its pillars. Its stairway had 8 steps. Then he brought me into the inner court toward the east. He measured it with the same measurements. Its chambers, pillars, and porch had the same measurements. There were windows in it, and in its surroundings porch. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its porch was toward the outer court. Palm trees were on its pillars on this side and on that side. Its stairway had 8 steps. He brought me to the north gate. He measured it with the same measurements. Its chambers, pillars, and porch. There were windows in it all around. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its pillars were toward the outer court. Palm trees were on its pillars on this side and on that side. Its stairway had 8 steps. A chamber with its entry was by the pillars at the gates. There they rinsed the burnt offering. In the porch of the gates were 2 tables on this side and 2 tables on that side, and on which to slaughter the burnt offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. Off to the side on the outside, as one goes up the entry of the north gate, were the 2 tables. On the other side of the porch of the gate were 2 tables. 4 tables were on one side, and 4 tables were on the other side by the side of the gate, 8 tables on which they would slaughter. There were 4 tables of hewn stone for the burnt offering, a cubit and a half long, a cubit and a half wide, and a cubit high. The instrument for the slaughter of the burnt offering and the sacrifice were laid on them. Hooks, a handbreadth long, were fastened in the house all around. The flesh of the offering was to be placed upon the tables. Outside the inner gate, in the outer court, were chambers for the singers, one of which was at the side of the north gate facing south. The one at the side of the east gate faced north. He said to me, "This chamber that faces toward the south is for the Kohanim who keep charge of the house. The chamber that faces toward the north is for the Kohanim who keep charge of the altar. These are the sons of Zadok, those from the sons of Levi, who come near to Adonai to minister to him." Then he measured the court. It was 100 cubits long and 100 cubits wide, a square. The altar was in front of the house. He brought me to the porch of the house. He measured each pillar of the porch, 5 cubits on this side and 5 cubits on that side. The width of the gate was 3 cubits on this side and three cubits on that side. The length of the porch was 20 cubits, and the width was 11 cubits. It was ascended by way of steps, where pillars stood, one on each side. And that is the end of chapter 40. In Revelation chapter 11, 1 and 2, it says, "Then a measuring rod like a staff was given to me, saying, 'Get up and measure the temple of God and the altar, and count those worshiping in it. But do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave it out, because it has been given to the nations, and they shall trample the holy city for 42 months.'" And I'm going to be coming back with part 4